What's up, guys? This is Punkify here for League Top 10, and I recorded this whole thing here and then realized I recorded in mono. So here I am again, recording the first impression sound for Rumble, the Mechanized Menace, Riot's new 4800 IP champion. Yes, we have a 4800 IP champion, which after it seems like forever, but Riot again returned to 4800 IP for Rumble, which is kind of interesting for me because I feel Rumble has some pretty unique or different things, which I thought they would have easily gone into 6300 IP range for this. But I am glad that he is not 6300 IP, although I still wish for a 450 IP or 1350 or even a 3150 IP champion. But I may be an old man when those days come. Anyways, we're here to talk about Rumble. Rumble, the Mechanized Menace, Riot's new 4800 IP champion, and is a melee mage by the classifications they have placed for him, which a melee mage is not really something that we've seen. Granted, we have seen hybrid tanks that go AP and are very tanky, but they are really not based for damage primarily. They're supposed to be the tanks, whereas Rumble seems to be one who's focused more on damage through magical damage with tankiness on the side. So that's kind of interesting, kind of a unique take on a mage, and definitely something that I was eager to try out. Now Rumble, first of all, like I always do, I have to say, is he worth 4800 IP? Well, definitely if you are someone who is very stingy with your IP, does not like to spend it a lot on 6300 IP champions, Rumble may look like a pretty good buy for you because 4800 IP is fairly cheap, and he offers something pretty unique. In my opinion, he would be a good buy, although I don't think that he would be fun or a good champion for everybody, just because of his mechanics make him a little bit different than what you would expect. What I mean by that is because that he doesn't use mana or energy or anything like that, he's all based around heat. This presents an interesting challenge for Rumble players. He pretty much dictates how many times he can use an ability. You can use an ability 5 times, or you can use your abilities rather 5 times, excluding your ultimate, before he reaches 100 heat. When he reaches 100 heat, he overheats, which actually silences you, that being his passive. Before 100 heat, after you've reached past 50 heat, you gain the ability that gives you extra damage or extra slowing on each of your spells. So Q would have extra damage, W I believe is extra movement speed, and E is extra damage and extra slowing. So this is all just kind of like a dance of the balancing of when to use your abilities. Some people don't like being hindered by something like that, and definitely I think for newer players, they'll find that being silenced at the inopportune time can be very frustrating. So for that reason, some people may not enjoy Rumble. Some people want to use their abilities as soon as they're up, and may find having to wait for the heat to go down a little bit frustrating. I can definitely say that you don't do the most damage when you're in the overheated state. It's just a little bonus of damage to your auto attacks, and definitely staying in the danger zone, which is 50 heat and plus, is the better option. So for this reason, I say I enjoy Rumble. I feel that he was worth 4800 IP champion rather, but I don't think everybody will enjoy him, which is something that usually is kind of not the case here when I review a champion. Either he's good or he's bad in my opinion, and people that enjoy melee will enjoy him, or people that enjoy range will enjoy this champion, etc. But Rumble being a mage melee and one with some interesting mechanics, it definitely is not going to be everybody's cup of tea. So now that I've talked about a little bit what makes him unique, if he's worth it or not, let's talk about what exactly does he do. What's his role? Well, his role is kind of hard to explain. He's a melee mage, which means that his abilities do magical damage, yet he's in melee range. Because he's in melee range, you have to build him accordingly. You can't just build straight AP, in my opinion, because of the fact that he would be very squishy, and that's counterproductive to being a melee mage. I feel that his role is kind of a support DPS mage rather, being that your abilities give you the opportunity to either mass AoE slow an extra team and do damage to them, that being your ultimate, or you can single target slow someone with your E in the second charge of the E, or you can multi-slow, meaning you can slow one person and then choose to slow another person by using one charge on one person and one charge on the other. His slowing capabilities is what makes him the best at what he does, which is being able to slow. And I really feel like he's almost a support version of Corki. pretty low cooldowns. Your Flame Spitter, which is your Q, is an AoE cone just like Corki's Gatling Gun is. In fact, it actually does more damage early game than Corki's Gatling Gun. And so for that reason, he kind of allows your team to stick to the enemy team with all of his slows, and he cuts off routes with his ultimate. And so his role is kind of this support, AP, slowing, nuke type person, although he doesn't really have a straightforward nuke because a lot of his abilities are over time. So that kind of presents an interesting situation for Rumble players. How do you really weigh how much you're worth to a team? And I definitely can say that it has to be through his slows. So early game, how does he exactly play? Well, early game, like I said, his Q, his Flame Spitter, does more damage than Corki's Gatling Gun, which means that if you're playing against melee champions, you need to be up in people's faces. You need to be up in the creep line, spamming your Q there a little bit to actually get some damage on anybody trying to get your last hits. You're able to harass with Q so often, it has such a low cooldown, that you want to get up in people's faces, push them back, try to deny them creeps, deny them experience, whatever you can do. If you have someone else in your lane that's very aggressive, someone else who can stun or taunt like Shin or Rammus, then definitely those are good champion picks to be in a lane with you. And you can definitely get first blood if you get that Flame Spitter and keep spamming it, and they have no way of regenning. In this reason, I usually went like either Doran Shield or Boots and 3 HP pots early game, because that allowed me to either be very tanky up in people's faces, or be very mobile and up in people's faces with some HP pots to spare. Now by mid game, you should start solidifying yourself. You should really start using your ultimate to cut off routes whenever mini team fights erupt, both in your lane or when larger team fights erupt. Usually this is when you have a couple core items. I really feel like one of those core items, which I'll talk about overall as build in a second, but one of the core items I will talk about right now is Crystal Scepter, which pretty much makes you the slow king. You can slow whatever you want. It makes Q slow more, it makes your ultimate slow more, it makes your E slow more. You pretty much can catch up to anybody who's within range of one of your spells, and you will stick to them the entire time because of how low a cooldown his spells are on. You're pretty much going to be doing AoE damage to the enemy teams in mid game. You're going to be slowing everybody. You're going to be catching fleeing enemies with your harpoon and either killing them outright with it or slowing them so everybody can catch up to it. That's his really goal. Late game, his damage seems to taper off no matter if you have a lot of AP or not. He's not going to be as good as a straight mage late game, just because he's meant to be bulky, so that kind of takes away from his item set a little bit, takes away from his numbers a little bit. But definitely he can still be up in people's faces, slowing and doing his job as best as possible. His ultimate really shines in late game team fights because you can either lay it down straight on top of everybody and do damage to them, or you can completely cut off a route of fleeing enemies, or completely cut off a route to save towers or to save your champion friends and whatever you want, and that can make or break late game team fights. So with all that being spoken about, there we go. Let's talk a little bit about what I ran for runes and masteries. For runes, I ran, of course, Magic Penetration Red, because even though he's a melee-based champion, all of his abilities are magical-based, and it just makes sense to go Magic Penetration. For yellow, I ran Armor, because you do want to be a little bit more bulky in those team fights, so I ran Armor so I could, especially early game, be up in people's faces, take some hits from auto attacks, take some minion hits, etc. Now for blue, I ran mostly during the test cooldown reduction, but I feel in hindsight that was a mistake. His abilities, although you can get cooldown reduction, his abilities and his use of heat kind of hinders the use of cooldown reduction, because of the fact that you can only use an abilities 5 times, excluding your ultimate, before you overheat, no matter what your cooldown reduction is. And let me tell you, even without cooldown reduction, 5 times is very quick. You can use 5 abilities very quickly in a team fight, and you will overheat a lot. So cooldown reduction almost seems wasted. You're not going to get that much potential more damage out of it. You may get the damage a little earlier, but in the end you're still going to be overheating sooner in the team fight rather than later, which may or may not break or win or break a team fight. Who knows? I definitely can say that overheating is worse off than getting the ability to use your abilities, because even though you gain a magical damage to your auto attacks, it's not as good as, say, a Flame Spitter ticking for 3 seconds on a champion, or hitting someone with a Harpoon, etc. So that's for my blues. I would have recommended instead like magic resist per level, or AP blues, something to either give you a little bit more aggressive stance or something more defensive stance. Now for my Quints, I went AP Quints just to give me a little bit more damage and oomph early game, because even though your Flame Spitter is, you know, lower ranks early game, if you can get yourself in the danger zone, that's 30% extra damage. And of course your AP is just going to build upon that. So definitely AP Quints was a good choice in that. I get defensive items to compensate for not going like HP Quints or something. Now for masteries, because he doesn't use mana or anything, and because you don't jungle with him, I haven't yet to see a Rumble jungle, and I doubt that a Rumble could jungle well, you're pretty much confined to the offensive tree and the defensive tree. So I went Magic Penetration with the AP points in the offensive tree, and then I spent all my points in defensive. I was running Ignite and Flash, which meant that I didn't have enough points, you know, left over going in defensive to, you know, get what I wanted out of utility just to get the Flash cooldown. So I just spent it all in defensive to get the increased attack speed and ability power, and then I spent, like I said, the offensive just to get the magical penetration. That makes you really bulky. You still gain some ability power out of the defensive and attack speed, and really helps him out, and I feel that's the best choice, you know, coupled with Ignite and Flash. Now that we've kind of gotten the base stats down, let's talk about a little bit of items. Now with items, a lot of people were going straight AP when he first came out, which I feel is a great mistake. And then you started seeing a couple people start going hybrid builds and doing pretty well with hybrid, which is definitely what I agree is the best choice of action for items for him. I already mentioned that I either went boots or a shield early on as my first items, but past that point, the item that no matter what I went for first was Crystal Scepter. Riley's Crystal Scepter is probably the best item on him, bar none. It kind of works off of everything, like I said. It gives him HP, which makes him tankier. It gives him AP, which makes his abilities hit harder, and it makes him slow like an amazing beast. He can slow so much with his Q and his E. Nobody that gets in within range of your spells is going to get away. Your teammates are either going to catch up to them as you slow them, and they're not going to be able to kill you in time as they catch up to the enemy, which means that, you know, you can just sit there and, you know, bind them up as much as you want. And then also works off your ultimate, so you just slow whenever you want. You know, Mundo slows where he pleases, except it's Rumble. So definitely rushing that item first is great. After that, I typically went a Hextech Gunblade if I wanted to go more offensive. Again, that gives you attack damage, ability power, lifesteal, and spell vamp. All four of those stats he can use. He can use his attack damage when he auto attacks. He can use the ability power on his abilities. He can lifesteal because he auto attacks, and he can spell vamp off of his abilities. Not to mention the active, which gives you a 300 magical damage nuke, and an extra slow, which you can use once you've overheated or something. Definitely that's a great choice of item there. If you want to go a little bit more defensive early, depending on what you're up against, if you're up against a lot of magic, I would definitely recommend going to Force of Nature. You already got the HP out of the Crystal Scepter, so Force of Nature is a good choice. If you want to go a little bit more tanky versus AD, Sunfire Cape gives you still AoE damage around you, and gives you that tankiness from the armor and the HP. Merc Treads were the name of the game for boots. It's what I went with him, pretty much bar none. You're going to be up in people's faces, so of course they're going to try to slow or stun you. So Merc Treads are just what you want to go. I pretty much never went any kind of, you know, magic penetration. I left that up for the pure mages to go. Because my job, I felt, wasn't so much as damage as it was sustained damage with slowing and entangling people up. It's almost like I was playing a mage version of what they would consider a bruiser, or what they want bruisers to be. You know, someone like Renekton, ability based, you know, get up in people's faces, do whatever damage. I then went Ginsu Rageblade, which again gives you the passive bonus where you get up to 8 stacks, you attack quicker, have more ability power, attack damage, etc., which is a great choice of item. And then I went Lichbane. Lichbane, of course, allows you to really benefit the most off of your low cooldowns, allow you to spam that passive a lot more. You get movement speed, you get some magic resist, making you tankier. The mana is pretty much the only wasted stat on that, but I think it really makes up with it with the ability power, and of course the fact that, you know, you get the passive proc as well. So that's a really good build, I think, for him, and I really think it's one of the most optimal or ideal. You could swap out a couple items for more AP or something like that. You could even just build revolvers instead of Rageblade or Lichbane, which I've seen people do. I've seen some of the top players playing Rumble just after getting a Gunblade, just get a lot of revolvers and just kind of carry themselves with that. So that is definitely an option also because of how much spell vamp you can get off of that. That's pretty much my ideal build for him, guys, and that's pretty much how I would play Rumble. With Rumble, like I said, you're up in people's faces, you're slowing. That's what you want to do. That's your main goal. That is your purpose in life. If you're playing against a Rumble, please make sure you have some kind of long distance closer, gap closer, or some kind of long distance stun, because he really does not do well once you get in range of him and you slow him. If you don't have anything like that, you're kind of up a creek without a paddle, because if he's a good Rumble, will be able to double slow you with E plus Riley's Crystal Scepter, and by the time you reach up to him again, he'll have already used W to propel himself forward more, use E or whip around with Q to slow you again, and it's kind of this, you know, never-ending cycle of him slowing you. I've gotten away from so many situations like that. Likewise, if you're playing as Rumble, do exactly what I just said versus the person who's chasing you, and you will succeed, and you will win. Winning. Oh, I can't believe I did that right there. Anyways, guys, that's been my thoughts on Rumble there. I do feel that he is worth 4,800 AP, 4,800 IP rather. If you like how I've spoken about him and like how, you know, he seems to play, let me know what your thoughts are about him in the comments below. If you think he's balanced, if you had a chance to play him, what you think about it. If you've enjoyed the video, please let me know with a thumbs or a comment. That really helps me out, lets me know that I should keep doing these, and makes me feel good inside, warm in the tummy. This is Spunkify out, guys. I'll see you later.